Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to episode 4 of 5 on tobacco. So far this week, we've talked about where tobacco comes from and what it's doing to your brain and to your body, and what's been added into cigarettes to make it do those things to your body more quickly or better or smoother or whatever. Make sure you watch all of those episodes if you haven't already so you'll understand what's going on, because now we're in part 4, the psychology of smoking. Why do some people smoke? If you're unfamiliar with D-News Plus, or me, I'm Trace, hi. I also host D-News. D-News Plus is our longer form show where we break a big topic into smaller parts so everybody gets it a little bit better. So make sure you stick around by subscribing. But so far, we kind of get that companies are cramming addictive chemicals into the cigarettes to help our obsession with smoking be stronger and, feel better. But why, and I've said this already, but why do we light it on fire and shove it in our face hole? Right? Is that not a weird behavior? It is. Studies show as many as 1 million teenagers think it's cool to do that every freaking year and start smoking. And despite these awful anti-smoking commercials that we've all been exposed to, and you know the ones I'm talking about, there are a lot of them. Do you have ones that you love, like ones that you think are really cool, or ones that you hate? Tell me in the comments. There are also stages of smoking. Something called preparation, which is the formation of beliefs. I'm thinking about trying smoking. You may not be talking about it, but you're thinking about it. Then there's the initial trying. That's the first cigarette or first few cigarettes. Then there's experimentation. This is sometimes thought of, for me anyway, as social smoking, irregular use. You smoke when you're drunk. You smoke when you're out with your friends who smoke. Then you move on to regular use, which is regular but infrequent. So, you smoke on the weekends, but you do it pretty much every weekend. Then there's addictive use, and that's when the nicotine has affected you by enough that you have to have more nicotine. That's nicotine dependent. Regular smoking, most days, every day, multiple times a day. There are a bunch of reasons that a person could need to feel like they have to smoke, and not so much the addictive part, but in the beginning, in the preparation and the initial trying and the experimentation phases. The main ones are parental pressure or peer pressure, socioeconomic backgrounds, advertising, and even just personality types. Some people are just more likely to pick up a cigarette and think, I want to put this in my mouth and light it on fire. You may not have heard a lot about the personality type one. We're going to come back to that later. But which one of these plays the biggest role is actually a really hard question to answer. Some people talk about cigarette smoking in terms of rebellion against parental pressure. So if your parents smoke, maybe you won't. Or if they don't and they're against it, maybe you will. Because, I'm rebelling, I'm a teenager, I'm crazy. But we can't really say any one factor has the most influence necessarily, because studies have compared a few of the factors to try and figure it out, but nothing is super clear. Nothing rises to the top, if you will. One study, published in the Oxford Journals, compared parents' and friends' influence on smoking habits in adolescence. It was a longitudinal study, so it was over time, and it focused on 15,705 adolescents from 6 different European countries: Denmark, Finland, the Netherlands, Portugal, Spain, and the United Kingdom. They focused on the onset of smoking habits. So if we go back to that stages of smoking, like the preparation, initial trying stages. The adolescents hadn't started smoking yet, but the average age of the participants were 13.6 years. And the study was basically split 50-50, male and female, with 0.01% preferring not to answer in their sex. Just, make sure we include people who are non-binary. And they gave a questionnaire to students in the fall of 1999, and then again a year later. Before we get into what they found, previous studies had suggested peer influence was the biggest factor for adolescents starting to smoke, right? You've probably all heard that, peer pressure, it's really important, it's really big. And these findings actually show that's not necessarily the case. Peer influence was overestimated. And so was the role that friends and friend groups and best friends, all of that was smaller than they originally thought. Even parental influence over smoking was underestimated. The study did note more research was needed, one of my favorite phrases, to take into account other factors. But still, the fact that your friend groups and your parents aren't as big a deal as they thought is kind of a big deal, right? Because what is it then? If it's not your friends, and it's not your peer pressure, and it's not you rebelling against your parents or going with the flow of what they do, then what's going on? Both peer and parental influence do play a huge role in an adolescent's smoking habits. But another factor that's been studied by other groups that might also be a huge factor is income level. One study took a stab at identifying what effect exactly socioeconomic status would have on smoking habits. And they looked at data from something called the Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System, which includes 4.7 million adults from 1996 to 2012. They found that counties across the U.S. that were typically more wealthy had huge declines from 96 to 2012 in smoking rates. It was most notable for women. The smoking rate for women declined in around half of the more wealthy counties. However, poor counties showed only a 4% drop. 4% in comparison to a huge, notable decline, especially for women. The personality factor that I mentioned earlier also comes into play here once you realize that your peer pressure and your parental groups might not be as big a deal, and also that socioeconomic status comes into play. Now we come back to personality. So one study we found looked at common personality trait theories in relation to addictive behaviors. The more widely accepted trait that was associated with people who picked up smoking was extroversion. You get gratification from outside yourself, you're impulsive, sensation seeking. And one of the traits that non-smokers shared was that they were neurotic, they had more anxiety, they were more self-conscious. They looked at data from cross-sectional observational studies published across various journals from 1972 until 2001. The effect of those personality traits was tiny, negligible, not a lot there. I mean, obviously, again, more research is needed. So it doesn't turn out that there's any specific personality that we could identify that would be more likely to pick up smoking or more likely to avoid it. Another study found from the American Psychological Association that depression was somewhat causally related. They found that depressive symptoms were a good indicator of an adolescent picking up smoking, and that same study found that adolescent smoking actually has links to developing depression. So they're definitely causally related, but we're not really sure. So maybe we should add that to the anti-smoking ads. Am I right? What do you think? But speaking of anti-smoking ads, everyone is trying to quit right now. It's like the cool thing to try and quit, right? For some people. Some people are trying to pick it up. That's cool for some people too. Anyway, because of the trying to quit trend, people are creating whole new markets because for some reason we love putting things in our mouths and blowing smoke out. It looks kind of cool, so people want to do it. And that brings us to the smokiest of all the smoking water vapory thingy, vaping. Bro, what's vaping all about? We're going to find out about that more tomorrow and about the regulations and chemicals involved in that type of smoking. So make sure you subscribe so you get that episode tomorrow. Go down into the comments, let us know what you think about all this tobacco talk, and keep coming back here every day for more D News Plus. If you want to talk about it more, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Trace Dominguez.